In celebration of Gravios returning, I thought it would be best to make a video for people who don't know about it to get a sense of how strong it is. Many new players started with World and Rise after all and have no context for Gravios other than hearsay. So I figured I'd pit it against the ultimate measuring stick, Rathalos. More on this. He wasn't happy with Gravios beating up on his wife in the reveal footage. Since the footage in the gameplay seems to have high-rank materials, I made it a high-rank fight. Before listing the stats, I just wanted to mention that I made some changes to the earlier format. I realized that for some reason I had been assuming that Double Cross/GU used the same system as 4U for monster versus monster damage, and that I had made some assumptions that didn't hold up. Somehow, it escaped my notice that monsters in 4U at least sometimes deal less damage than the 1/10th I thought, 1/15th I think? And that it doesn't factor defense, and that GU monsters deal considerably less than this, 4% or 1/25th of full normal damage as far as I can tell. At least sometimes. I've discovered there's a variable that alters this on some quests, so I'll have to keep track of what I'm using as blueprints for custom quests, and I need to do a little more research on this in both Double Cross and 4U. A good deal of research was done already in the making of this video, which I'll get to later. In fact, before the fight starts, I want to make clear that most of this video is essay on the history of these two monsters, their place in the setting, Monster Hunter's diegetic gameplay and ludonarrative cohesion, and what we can expect from Wilds when it drops. This is not a 1-hour fight video. Timestamps will be given in the description if you're not interested in the fight itself. With that in mind, I've made some adjustments to the stats of the monsters in this video. So, this was an interesting result. How did it come to be this way? And to be clear, it did end this way 7 out of 8 times, with Rathalos winning by a much larger margin. Obviously, a major factor in this was just a matter of speed and ferocity. Rathalos was very good at moving too fast for Gravios to keep up with. However, as we discovered with the Astalos vs. Rathalos video, there can be big differences in how these fights go on a stone rank. Besides, the Gravios showcased in the video may drop high rank materials, but it uses moves that are exclusive to G rank and Double Cross, so that may be better as a point of comparison. Let's find out. Same as high rank. Both have the same quest modifiers, so they're the same again. This time attack multiplied by 25 divided by 8 and HP divided by 8. If you're enjoying the content, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing the video. Gravios won this time, but I should stress this is far from the only way this goes. Out of 18 runs, Gravios won 10. And in fact, Rathalos won so many at first, I figured the G-rank matchup was almost as one-sided as the high rank. There appears in the most definite sense. Where Gravios has power, Rathalos is a hard-to-hit flurry of activity. Power versus speed, Rathalos' ability to fly matters. I ended up recording so many fights because I had a hard time picking which one to use, and seeing more helped make sense of the matchup. Even now I'm reticent about which ones I pick to display. If you would like to see all of them, the 26 mostly unedited runs I recorded in both high rank and G rank are now available as a reward on my Patreon. With that out of the way, let's talk about the monsters a bit, explore this matchup more. Both Rathalos and Gravios are veterans to the series and featured in the very first original Monster Hunter on PlayStation 2 in 2004. Gravios is often considered to be a much stronger monster than Rathalos among fans, but why is that? In the 4th generation games, Gravios is given the same threat level as Rathalos in the Hunter's Notes, and their target quests are the same level. Hunting Gravios rewards slightly more money in Double Cross GU, indicating a slightly harder or stronger monster. However, Rathalos is slightly weaker in Double Cross than in 4U, where this is not the case and the two are completely even. In Double Cross, the Hunter rank points awarded for both are the same, implying some level of parity. There is some confusion about what threat levels are and what they actually mean, and why it's significant for a monster to have an equal threat level as another, so I should probably explain that a little. It's not just some diegetic difficulty rating for hunters to tell them which monsters are more dangerous to humans, and that means nothing anywhere else. It's genuinely a mechanic that exists to describe interactions between monsters. Threat levels first appeared in-game in Monster Hunter 3 Tri, a game described by the developers as having been built around the ecological existence of monsters in environments and interactions beyond just those with humans, and exists to tell the game what to do when monsters meet each other. Namely, monsters with a lower threat level than another monster have a chance to leave the area earlier than the normal tapping behavior would allow for, which their AI checks for every so often. In short, monsters with lower threat levels are programmed to flee from monsters with higher threat levels. Even in a world where threat levels are no longer stated directly in the Hunter's Notes, this mechanic still exists in some form, e.g. this Brachydios that wants absolutely nothing to do with this Lunastra. It's probably not directly stated in World, since monster behavior is a little more complex as far as I can tell. For instance, Nightshade Palumu's behavior is to always put another monster to sleep before running away, rather than a randomized check to see if it flees based on hierarchy. Furthermore, something like Great Jagras seems very aggressive towards stronger monsters. I haven't been able to look too much more into this, so I can't comment much on it, but the relevant part is this. Monsters with equal threat levels don't have strict dominance hierarchies. They can stay and fight. Rather than describing a relationship where Gravios is dominant over Rathalos, the interaction built into the ecological mechanics of the 4th gen games they share is that Rathalos and Gravios will fight on equal terms. In short, they'll engage in turf wars and fight for territory. Admittedly, this is quite rare. While they should be capable of meeting in Everwood expeditions, in the entirety of 4th generation there are 0 quests in which Rathalos and Gravios can encounter each other under normal circumstances. The only quest in 4U in which Gravios can fight Rathalos, G2 Temper Tantrum, is one in which the invading Rathalos, who shows up 9% of the time, is always frenzied from the moment it arrives. Additionally, a normal Gravios can invade the Azure Rathalos G2 Azure rival and pick a fight with it on equal terms, and a frenzied Azure Rathalos can invade and fight a normal Black Gravios in Hollow Promise. To be clear, by fight on equal terms, I don't mean equal stats or equal outcome, I just mean it's not set who runs away from the other. I do wonder if Capcom was actually paying attention to what monsters would show up in what quests, and were careful about what would be shown as a peer within the system they set up for it, though. It does seem like a lot of invaders in 4U quests are set up to be on equal footing with target monsters so as to demonstrate even fights, like the Azure Rathalos vs Seregios cutscene. Either that or to be clearly weaker or stronger, like the other 2 invader slots for Gravios being Iadrome and Apex Rajang. Following on the footsteps of 3rd generation, where monsters were explicitly meant to fight each other, and the official guide even recommends using monsters as a source of damage that outstrips that of players, it very much seems like the Frenzy virus in general is a gimmick to make monsters fight each other so that it's more realistically part of the game that it occurs often. even if monster versus monster damage is less than in Tri. Just like how the New World and Guiding Lands are characterized by more frequent monster conflicts, and the Anomaly and Curio were causing monsters to act abnormally violently and pick fights all over the place. Monster Hunter's world building obviously prides itself on its ecological sensibility, so it should be remembered there's usually some reason or excuse that there's so much fighting beyond monsters just not caring about their own well-being and getting into fights with opponents on par with themselves. As for the question of whether the subjects truly are on par with one another, the matching threat levels for Rathalos and Gravios even seem to go all the way back to first generation, where despite not appearing in the games themselves, the Pseudo-Diegetic Guide for Monster Hunter 1 Monster Hunter Job Security Guide lists both Rathalos and Gravios at the then maximum threat level of 5. Rathalos as a threat level 5 monster and things like Yankutku as a threat level 3 monster even seem defining for how this would continue to be expressed until Monster Hunter Rise. Though there are some differences, e.g. Rathian, Plesioth, and Kezu are considered threat level 5 monsters, but this does make sense in Monster Hunter 1's context. Nevertheless, within the game itself, Gravios is introduced slightly later in progression, and at least seems to be a stronger monster, by impression. And indeed, there is backing to this idea. It's hard not to feel that way when considering the size difference, but it's more than just that. Gravios has 25% more HP with harder hit zones, in a game where green was the maximum sharpness. All of its physical attacks hit harder for the same motion. And its heat ray was not only visually impressive, but hit way harder than Rathalos' fireballs, motion value 100 versus 65. In a presentation given in 2018 on a spreadsheet dated September 2007, the strength of monsters from the original game is listed by rank, with weakest to strongest being ranked by tier from left to right, and within tier listed from top to bottom. On this chart, Gravios is listed as being in a higher tier than Rathalos. However, things change over time. As seen here, Rathian, Plesioth, and Kezu are all at the same tier as Rathalos, like the Monster Hunter 1 threat levels indicate. If we look over to the Monster Hunter 3 section, for which this document was planning for with Monster Hunter 1 used as a reference, we see what players of later games are more familiar with, that Rathian is in a lower strength tier than Rathalos. Given the implicit power-ups that Rathian got in 3rd generation, such as the increased bulk from her redesign, as well as her hugely improved flying ability, the increased leg strength and balance to charge without falling over, such that a 1st generation Rathian's full power charge better resembles that of a weakened, exhausted 3rd generation Rathian, and perhaps most notably, the greater firepower to shoot giant fireballs and light the ground on fire, it seems unlikely that Rathian was meant to have become weaker in any way, and more likely that the scale has slid and Rathalos just got stronger. It seems to me that the Monster Hunter team likes explaining monsters getting stronger and the general power creep present in the games diegetically. It's no mistake that both monsters and players have been growing more powerful for a long time now, constantly adding on new abilities. It's easy to forget or just not realize, but there was a point in time in which this kind of acrobatics on walls was unthinkable for hunters, but this kind of controlled flight and hovering for Rathalos was also just as far out of the picture. New World Uragaan are more strategic than those observed in the Old World, which is thought to be due to competition with stronger monsters. The increased muscle mass and physical strength of New World Deviljho relative to Old World individuals is said to be the reason they can carry and swing heavy monsters around. These changes in abilities or appearance are usually or always acknowledged as existing in-universe in some way. As a pertinent example, the previously noted differences in 3rd generation Rathian's behavior in-game, e.g. fighting while flying, shooting giant fireballs when enraged, are noted to be real and extant in-universe regional differences and not just a retcon, along with things like the differences in their appearance, like the shape of their feet. The design changes for Rathalos and Rathian are acknowledged as being different strains of Rathalos species existing in different spaces in the world, like the New World Rathalos being a stronger and more flexible flyer because of its larger wings and 4 wing fingers compared to the Old World individual's 3. Coincidentally, this seems like it could tie into the diegetic evolutionary speculation on the formation of Rathalos' wings from a Tigrex-like ancestor. Just as Rathalos is better at flying than Tigrex, New World Rathalos is even further adapted for flight, something again reflected by how much more time World Rathalos spends in the air and fighting while hovering. Who's to say one species of Rathalos, or a population living in a given time or place, isn't just generally stronger than another? That seems sensible. As an example, the attack power of Rathalos' Fireball from Gen 1 to Gen 4 gradually increased from 65 to 80. To go into more detail, in 2nd Gen, Rathalos' aerial fireballs, at attack power 75, were stronger than its unchanged ground fireballs, and in Monster Hunter 3 and 4th Gen, all fireballs had a power of 80. In Monster Hunter World, Rathalos' fireballs were decreased to an attack power of 70, other than the back jump Flame Breath, which has a larger AoE and can now be used mid-air as a notable power-up. The caveat to this decreased power is, as is reflected by the lore constantly talking about how much stronger New World monsters are, is that Rathalos' quest/expedition modifiers are wildly higher for the same rank than they were in past games, which is a trend in World. In general, following Rathalos' progression from game to game is actually really telling and interesting. When you lay out all of the numbers across time, certain patterns emerge, and it becomes really, really clear both that ideas are being preserved and that there is indisputable power creep. For example, a calm, normal, low-rank World Rathalos' Fireball hits just as hard, 143 damage, as an enraged, high-rank Rathalos' Fireball from the original Monster Hunter. A low-rank multiplayer Rathalos from the original Monster Hunter, even while enraged, is incapable of one-shotting even a naked hunter with no buffs, whereas getting tagged by a calm World Rathalos under the same circumstances is an instant death sentence, when those same attacks come out much quicker and more easily in comparison. As much as I'm focusing on fireballs as a marker of firepower, I should note that Rathalos' physicality has grown too, and the huge-bodied 5th generation Rathalos is just as much more deadly than the old string bean as you would expect by their relative appearance. As an aside for those who might have noticed, the defense shown in the Monster Hunter 1 Fireball clip reads 31 because player defense increases by 30 at low health automatically. It's just a little hidden mechanic in the game. The hit was taken with 1 defense. And mind you, Monster Hunter 1 and Monster Hunter World have the exact same basic defense formulas with the exact same baselines in armorless hunters, and both monster and weapon motion values have largely not changed in 20 years. For example, the attack stat load on greatswords has remained 4.8, the motion value on the default chop is and has always been 0.48 times the true raw value. It's the greatsword moveset that has become more powerful as hunters evolve by doing things like harness ki to charge their attacks, which started in DOS. Within this framework, one has to wonder why the games don't feel like they're getting harder like that, and the answer is deceptively in plain sight. The armor made from these stronger Rathalos is also getting stronger. Stronger monsters yield stronger materials yield stronger armors, and the advances in smithing are no less notable and groundbreaking than the techniques of hunters, such as using high-quality monster materials to upgrade armor, or the discovery that one can use armor spheres to do a fast and easy version of this. A representation of the universal advancement of society, as hunting progression evolves and spreads from where it originated on the outskirts of the Western trade country. The sharing of knowledge and techniques across cultural borders results in everyone advancing. It's not just the armor either. Here, this is a table of the stats of a selected handful of starter Iron, Bone, and Rathalos greatswords across the mainline titles as a point of comparison. You can see the consistency here at the baseline, the common point of reference at the start of the game. Common weapons from common materials are always the same, but weapons made from stronger monsters in later games are stronger. Props to my man, the man, for getting green on a Buster Sword, though. As a side note, I rather like the detail here that the starting weapons in World are or are equivalent to early upgraded weapons in all of the games previous. This matches well with the idea that unlike all previous games, the Hunter in World isn't a complete newbie. They're a member of the Recommended Group, an A-lister, and the commission is made up of experienced hunters. Rise and Wilds are similar. In Rise, despite technically not having registered with the guild yet, You've been training for years with the renowned Master Utsushi, and in Wilds you are once again handpicked as an elite to lead a major mission. This is combined with other sources of evolution in the player's strength. Food has become both more powerful and more easily accessible as the people come together to aid the hunter as a community and the hunter helps supply ingredients. The hunter in Rise has not only mastered unique and powerful techniques utilizing endemic wire bugs, but also possesses a petal lace to be empowered by endemic spiribirds. A hunter in Generation 1 through 4 can only have 150 health max, whereas the playable hunter in World can have up to 200, and the Flame of Kimura in Rise can have up to 250. The progressive power of hunters as time goes on may even be acknowledged narratively. The Minister of the Elder Hall in Dundorma, a character from Monster Hunter DOS, essentially confirms that the player-hunter in Monster Hunter Generations is more accomplished than the hunter from DOS, and maybe for you as well. I can't say I've ever met a hunter as accomplished as you are. But in order for the game and the struggle to continue to exist, that would mean monsters would have to keep pace. And we're told this as well. The Dragon Watch claims they've solved some monster mysteries recently, specifically relating to, IS abilities. As you know, this has been applied to develop human, technological development and equipment, doodads. But you know, the more we adapt to hunting them, the more the monsters adapt to fighting back. Monsters aren't going anywhere. It's the natural order of things. You could even say it's fate. One such example of this continuous evolution of monsters is, well, Gravios. Coming back to the point of interpreting changes in monsters as diegetic and real, the Monster Hunter Visual Memorial Archives book published for the 10th anniversary talks about the changes in how Gravios uses its heat ray. When it first appeared, it only shot its heat ray in a straight line, but later, perhaps to survive in the harsh natural environment, it acquired many variations and began to use it in all sorts of positions, such as sweeping horizontally, expelling the high heat gas generated by the heat ray from its abdomen, shooting upwards from below, rapidly firing short heat rays while walking, and shooting while turning around. Nevertheless, there is a significant difference between learning to use one's abilities differently and having those abilities grow more powerful, gaining new abilities entirely, and growing larger and stronger and faster. If it's constantly changing and getting stronger, maybe Rathalos isn't so much the ultimate measuring stick as it might seem, despite being one of the only monsters to appear in every single game. Rathian's stats are more static, and I've already discussed how she's changed, and she continues to change. Wild's trailers showcase her using moves from Dread Queen and even breathing fire in the air, which no Rathian has ever done and would seemingly indicate she's mastered flight on a level similar to Rathalos, at least in the past. If they're willing to blur the line between their identities like that, it more than likely means that Rathalos is going to move in his own direction and no longer need to monopolize things like area fireballs, because he's gained something else. He'll be stronger. It might be easy to assume that everything is changing and that the power growth and general change is just the scale sliding for everyone equally, but the fact of the matter is that this just isn't true. Not everything changes in the direction of stronger. Why this potentially matters is that Gravios had never received any kind of update. Even in 4th gen, it was visually stuck with the 1st generation model. In 1st gen, it was essentially a big fish in a little pond, swimming with pond rats that are a lot bigger in the sea that is the franchise. The fight changed a bit in 4th gen to be sure, and it gained a new move, mostly nothing it didn't have in 2nd gen already, but it also lost the ability to fly, when its size range had been made smaller. You might think that the flying move is replaced by Gravios' crushing jump attack, but no, it actually had this move at the same time as the flying thing all the way back in Gen 1, which it did to get out of the way of attacks. What's more is that Basarios would still do this in Gen 4 when Gravios wouldn't anymore. You can also see Gravios' latent flying ability in this scripted entrance to the arena in Freedom Unite for the G3 quest Pride on the Line. Something else to note about this is that it was clearly intentional on their part. Diablos will enter the arena by digging, for example, and given Bessarios digs, there's little reason Gravios couldn't as well. Though it's possible they didn't include this for world-building reasons, as widespread digging for monsters didn't really start until Generation 3, including Gravios. Another example of monsters getting stronger? Maybe? Gravios and Bessarios will, for example, dig like Diablos if they find themselves out of bounds in 4th gen, and also for area transition. But Diablos itself will fly. There's absolutely no reason they couldn't have had Diablos dig here like it does for area transitions, and there's similarly no reason Gravios couldn't have flown unless they didn't want it to. Moreover, while some might be skeptical of out-of-bounds animations that are rarely seen in 4th generation onward, Diablos itself here flies exactly like it's described in some of its original development art. Not very good at it, wings flapping wildly to keep it airborne and not going very far, but still flying nonetheless. Although, to be fair, it is possible that Black Gravios is just better at flying than normal Gravios. The special individuals certainly seem to utilize greater flying ability in Frontier than normal specimens, or the special individuals of normal Gravios. But coming back to normal Gravios' changes again. By and large, it was mostly made less impressive, not just relative to the power creep of abilities and movement around it, but to itself. Case in point, Gravios' normal heat ray decreased from attack power of 100 in the original Monster Hunter 1 to 80 and stayed that way, the same as Rathalos' Fireball would be when both are in Monster Hunter 4. Gravios also had a stronger heat ray with a power of 90, originally 100 when it was added in 1st gen, where the additional built-up heat causes it to discharge fire gas afterwards, but this is still weaker than the original heat ray, and frankly just looks like it. Only Black Gravios' unique heat ray that actively marks it as more powerful than normal Gravios has the original power of 100. Although maybe still less spectacular than the original, the 4U Black Gravios heat rays do help communicate their greater strength not just through increased size and brightness, but by a change in color. As Black Gravios builds up excessive heat, which causes it to lose the weak heat ray from its moveset entirely by the way, the flames start to turn blue. Probably not coincidentally, the same thing happened to Azure Rathalos in this game, where the accumulated heat of the darker and harder shelled subspecies causes the temperature of the flames to grow and change in color. Going back to Monster Hunter World again for a moment, when Azure Rathalos enrages, it obtains special blue fire that, similar to Black Gravios, surpasses the normal species, its strongest attack in this state in high rank even having an attack power of 100, once again an implied parity visually and mechanically. I doubt this is a total coincidence. Also, I am obviously aware that Double Cross made Gravios' heat ray look more visually impressive than 4U, like they did most monster VFX in general, but given there's no Black Gravios or corresponding special Black Gravios heat rays to compare to, I had to look at it. It's actually interesting how they seemingly reconciled the two looks in Double Cross, in that the beam flares out widely, but it actually has a narrow core of what is likely where the real power probably is. So it doesn't actually strike me as necessarily being more powerful or effective as much as more gassy or under more internal pressure, causing it to spray with the throat as an inefficient nozzle. After all, Agnactor's beam is unambiguously more powerful than Gravios's, but that's because Agnactor is the GOAT. Meanwhile, Rise Rathalos was given a new flamethrower-like attack, a continuous and focused ray of fire aimed downward to create some kind of directed explosion of piled and smothered superheated fuel. Not only is this more visually impressive than anything normal Rathalos has ever done, it's also the strongest attack it's ever had, with an attack power of 100, the same as Gravios' strongest heat ray. And what do we see in this new super powerful flame attack that represents Rathalos' increased literal firepower, surpassing that of Gravios and matching Azure Rathalos in World? That's right, blue flames. I think when Monster Hunter Rise came out, or the movie before that, There were a number of people surprised by Rathalos' usage of a flamethrower-like attack, but the reality is that it has slowly been gaining this ability over time in the games first, with successive games showing Rathalos becoming more adept at this. This attack, in the guides being officially named Taiku Hosha Buretsu, Taiku meaning staying in the air, and Hosha Buretsu meaning radiating or emission breath. Hosha as in Kaien Hoshaki, the Japanese word for flamethrower. It didn't come out of nowhere. You'll note we get a hint of some blue flames here, too, also in GU. And I mean, why wouldn't this happen? Basarios shoots fireballs, and has the capacity to transform that ability into fiery beams, which it does more consistently effectively when powered up, either when enraged or when its head is heated. And Gravios can shoot some form of fireballs too, by careful control of its heat ray. Why couldn't Rathalos have a continuous breath attack? They're both flying wyverns, but are probably decently close to one another evolutionarily. More on that later. Xenojiva is another example of a monster that breathes fireballs, which also transform into the ability to shoot beams as it builds up energy in its head, as it builds up heat. As is mostly the case with Basarios and Gravios, the adult Safijiva no longer shoots fireballs at all. The reason being that it is permanently in the same critical state as Xenojiva, that it is powerful. Psst! By the way, the biological rationale given for why Xenojiva needs to use its energy beams is exactly the same ecological explanation for Gravios' heat ray. Coincidence? Stew on it a little bit, there'll be more on it later. More than anything, continuous energized beams, or emissions, seem, appropriately and logically, associated with increased power, which again says a lot about what's been happening to Rathalos over the years as it continues to evolve in the series. This makes the wild Gravios extra special. It's the first time in 20 years Gravios has been visually altered in a mainline Monster Hunter game, and there's sure to be lore to accompany that, whether spoken or implicit. Just like how being redesigned for Rise justified Basarios suddenly generating huge quantities of heat. In terms of visual power creep, Gravios' heat ray now looks as though it's rocking firepower reminiscent of Xenojiva, an extremely powerful elder dragon in World, in the way they melt and burn the ground underneath by passing over it. And it now even possesses the special super heat ray previously reserved for Black Gravios, as a testament to Gravios' power seemingly growing to be on par with older versions of its subspecies. And the downward fire breath obviously invokes Teostra's fire breath, both Xeno's lasers and Teostra's fire breath having attack values around 100 over the years, give or take 10. Curious how these dragons that eat ores and combustible minerals like blaze coal and firestones in the volcano and swamp have things in common like fire breath and surrounding themselves with flames and explosions expelled from their bodies. You can generally rely on Monster Hunter to have effective communication regarding the visual power of attacks and how much damage they do to the player, which is good game design but also generally services ludonarrative cohesion. Case in point from before was the nerfing of Gravios' heat ray in both damage and animation, but it's hardly the only example of this. The example that always comes to my mind is what happened to Kushala Daor's basic wind breath, which decreased in power from 100 in 2nd gen all the way to 80 or even 70 in 4th gen. 5th gen gets around this a bit by making the power vary significantly depending on Kushala's wind pressure level, which is clever. Speaking of Kushala, it sure is weird how both Kushala and Gravios are notable for having metallic exoskeletons formed from bones on the outside of their bodies and a diet of ores and minerals, or how they both have holes all along their bodies for expelling gas, and how that gas is specifically tied to their breath weapon. By now you've probably noticed me bringing up Elder Dragons repeatedly and making connections to Gravios, and this is very clearly intentional, but it's also going to have to wait to the next video. We can already guess just from its appearance that this Gravios is stronger just based on text going all the way back to 1st generation. In Hunter's Encyclopedia 1, it shows concept art for Gravios and presents it as being an in-universe sketch for a young Gravios that has just shed its Basarios rock shell in preparation for maturing, and so is skinny. The reason provided in this text for why Gravios puff up and become so fat is that the increased thickness of their body helps keep their deeper internal organs insulated from the heat of their environment and heat-storing organs. A fat Gravios is a Gravios with heat protection. A Gravios with more heat protection is a Gravios that can amass more heat. A Gravios with more amassed heat is a Gravios that can use more powerful heat rays, hence the entire ecology and setting material behind black Gravios. Hence why Wild's Gravios can pull off some of the same abilities, though not all of them. It's still just a normal Gravios after all. Regardless of it being buffed, time will tell if Gravios has been reworked to stand above Rathalos again, or if Rathalos will be upgraded just as much or more.
めちゃくちゃ言いづらいまあでもそのなんてどういうかまあでも印象的にはしたいなと思っております。ただ普通に出してもそうはならないだろうとは思っているので、ちょっとお楽しみにでなところですかね。そうですかね。
Hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching. Happy Wild's release date.